I never thought I'd be the one standing at my son's grave, wondering if the people weeping around me were the ones who put him there. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 67 years old, I buried my son 8 months ago, and last Tuesday I watched his killer get sentenced to life in prison. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because if I don't tell this story in order, you won't believe any of it. My son Daniel was 41 years old when he died. He was a civil engineer who had built his own firm from nothing, from a folding table in my garage to a company worth just over $4 million. I watched him do it. Every late night, every rejected bid, every moment he almost quit and didn't. Daniel was the kind of man who made you proud just by knowing him. Quiet, methodical, loyal to a fault. That last part is what got him. He married his wife, Claire, 11 years before he died. I'll be honest with you. I never fully trusted her. Not because she was unkind, at least not openly. It was something else. The way she looked at Daniel's success like it was a resource to be managed rather than a life to be shared. The way she smiled a half-second too late when he entered the room. I told myself I was being an overprotective father. I told myself a lot of things. They had no children. Claire had always said she wasn't ready, and Daniel, patient as he was, said he'd wait. He waited 11 years. When Daniel collapsed in his office on a Thursday afternoon in March, his assistant called me before she called 911. I don't know why. Maybe she was panicking. Maybe some part of her already knew this wasn't right. By the time the paramedics arrived, Daniel was unconscious. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. Cardiac arrest, the doctor told me. He said it like it was weather, like it was simply a thing that happened. Daniel was 41 years old. He ran 5 miles 3 times a week. He had just had a physical in January. Everything was normal. I stood in that hospital hallway, and I could not make the math work. Claire arrived 20 minutes after I did. She was dressed well. Her makeup was done. I remember thinking it took her longer than it should have to get here, and she looked like she had stopped somewhere first. I pushed the thought away. Grief looks different on different people. I had no right to judge. The funeral was held the following Saturday. Daniel had a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues, people who genuinely loved him. The church was full. I sat in the front row and I felt like I was underwater. I could see people moving and mouths opening and closing, but nothing reached me clearly. What reached me clearly was this. Halfway through the service, a man I had never seen before sat down in the third pew on the right side of the church. He was younger than Daniel, maybe mid-30s. Dark jacket, expensive watch, the kind of easy posture that comes from never having worried about money. He sat next to Claire's younger sister, but he wasn't there for her. His eyes kept drifting to Claire, and Claire's eyes, just once, just for a second, drifted back. I filed that away. After the burial, we gathered at Daniel's house, which was now Claire's house, for the reception. People brought food and told stories, and I stood near the window because I couldn't sit down. At some point, the man from the church made his way over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm in a way that felt like a statement. He said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Daniel was a good man, but Claire is strong. She'll be fine. I'll make sure of that." I looked at him. I said, "I'm sorry, who are you?" He smiled. "A family friend," he said. "I've known Claire for years." He walked away before I could say anything else. I watched him cross the room toward Claire, and I watched her smile when she saw him. A real smile, the kind I'd rarely seen her give Daniel, and something cold settled in my chest. I drove home that night, and I sat in my kitchen until 2 in the morning. I kept hearing the way that man had said it. "I'll make sure of that. Not we'll get through this. Not we'll support her. I'll make sure of that." Like Daniel's absence was an opening. Like he had been waiting for this room to come available. 3 weeks after the funeral, I learned from Daniel's attorney that Claire was moving quickly to liquidate the business. She had already contacted a buyer. She was selling Daniel's firm, the one he had spent 15 years building, for significantly under market value, for a fast close. The attorney was troubled. He called me because he didn't know who else to call. "She's in a hurry," he said. "That's all I can tell you. She doesn't want an appraisal. She just wants it done." Why would a grieving widow be in such a hurry? I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. I started remembering things. A conversation Daniel and I had about 6 months before he died. We were sitting on my back porch after a cookout, and he had been quiet for a long time. And then he said, "Dad, do you ever feel like someone knows you better than you know yourself? And not in a good way?" I'd asked him what he meant. He shook his head. He said, "Nothing. Never mind. I'm just tired." I had let it go. I wish I hadn't. I went to see Daniel's doctor. I had no authority, no legal standing. I was just a father who could not let go of the math that didn't add up. The doctor couldn't tell me much, but what he said was enough. He said that in cases like Daniel's, where a young, apparently healthy man suffers sudden cardiac arrest, a full toxicology screen is standard. He assumed one had been ordered. He assumed someone had been paying attention. I contacted the medical examiner's office. It took me 4 days and 3 different phone calls to get a straight answer. The toxicology report had been ordered, but it had been marked low priority, standard for what appeared to be a natural cause death. It hadn't come back yet. I asked them to expedite it. I don't know exactly what made me do that. I can't point to a single moment and say, that's when I knew. It was accumulation. The man at the funeral. Claire's hurry with the business. That conversation on the porch. The way Daniel's assistant had looked at me at the service. Like she had something to say and no idea how to say it. I called Daniel's assistant the next morning. Her name was Patricia, and she had worked for Daniel for 6 years. She met me for coffee at a place near the old office, and she had a folder with her, which told me she had been waiting for someone to ask. She told me that in the 4 months before Daniel died, she had noticed changes. Claire had started coming into the office more often, which was unusual. She had never shown much interest in the business before. She had met privately with Daniel's accountant twice. She had also asked Patricia, casually, in what seemed like small talk, about Daniel's life insurance policy. Specifically, she had asked whether Patricia knew if it paid out for natural causes as well as accidents. Patricia had not known what to do with that. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself Claire was just being practical, but she had written it down, dated it, and kept it because something in her hadn't been able to let it go either. I took her folder home and I sat with it for a long time. The toxicology report came back on a Wednesday. I got a call from the medical examiner's office, and the voice on the other end was careful and measured in the way that people's voices get when they are about to say something that changes everything. There were traces of ethylene glycol in Daniel's system. Ethylene glycol, an antifreeze, a substance that, consumed in sufficient quantity over time, causes progressive organ damage that can culminate in cardiac arrest. A substance that, in small repeated doses, is difficult to detect unless you are specifically looking for it. A substance that has no business being in a healthy 41-year-old man's body. I had to sit down. The medical examiner had already contacted the police. By the time I drove to the station, there were detectives who wanted to talk to me. They had already pulled Daniel's medical records back 18 months. They had already identified a pattern. 3 separate visits in the preceding year where Daniel had reported fatigue, nausea, occasional dizziness. Each time he had been told it was stress. Overwork. He had been being poisoned slowly and no one had caught it. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Detectives executed a search warrant on the house. In a bedroom closet, in a bag that had been pushed to the back behind a row of shoeboxes, they found a small, unlabeled bottle. They found receipts, tucked inside a jacket pocket, for a storage unit that Claire had rented 8 months before Daniel died. The storage unit contained documents, financial planning materials, research on life insurance claim timelines, and, this is the part that still makes my hand shake when I think about it, a legal notepad with handwritten notes that included, in Claire's handwriting, the name of the man from the funeral. His name was Marcus. He was not a family friend. He had been in a relationship with Claire for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. While Daniel was working late to build the company. While Daniel was being patient about starting a family. While Daniel was being poisoned. Marcus had a background in finance. He had helped Claire map out the value of Daniel's estate. He had helped her understand what she stood to inherit and how quickly she could access it. The notepad had figures on it. The figures had been updated multiple times. They had been planning this for a long time. I cannot describe to you what it felt like to read the detective's summary. I had known something was wrong, but knowing something is wrong and having it confirmed are two entirely different experiences. One is a bad feeling. The other is a door closing on a world where your son died of natural causes, and you were left standing in a world where your son was murdered by someone he trusted, someone who slept in his house, someone who sat in the front row at his funeral and accepted condolences. Claire was arrested on a Tuesday morning, 4 months after the toxicology results. Marcus was arrested the same day, at his apartment across town. I did not watch it happen. I didn't need to. The detective called me when it was done. The trial took 8 months. I sat in that courtroom for most of it. Claire's attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the ethylene glycol could have been accidental contamination, that the relationship with Marcus had begun after Daniel's death, that the notes were misinterpreted. He was a good attorney. He worked hard. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They came back with guilty on all counts for Claire. First-degree murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. Marcus was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 35 years. There was a moment in that courtroom, after the sentence was read, after Marcus stood up and they began to lead him out, when he turned and looked in my direction. I don't know what he expected to see. I looked back at him and I did not look away, and after a moment, he was the one who dropped his eyes. I want to tell you something that I've been thinking about since this began. Daniel knew. I don't have proof of that. I can't put it on a legal document, but that conversation on the porch. Do you ever feel like someone knows you better than you know yourself, and not in a good way? I think my son had started to feel it. I think some part of him had started to sense that something in his life was deeply wrong, and I think he didn't know how to say it out loud, because saying it out loud meant looking at his wife and accepting something he wasn't ready to accept. He was loyal to a fault. I said that at the beginning. That's what I meant. I have thought many times about what I should have done differently, whether I should have pushed harder on that porch conversation, whether I should have said out loud that I didn't fully trust Claire, whether my silence was a kind of failure. I have sat with that question for a long time, and I don't have a clean answer. I think the truth is that sometimes we protect people we love by saying hard things, even when it costs us something, even when they push back, even when we're wrong, because the alternative, the silence, the polite distance, the letting go, that has its own cost. Daniel's company was not sold. The sale was frozen as part of the investigation, and once the conviction came through, the estate entered probate. Daniel had a will. He had left provisions for several charitable causes, and the remainder, the bulk of what he had built, he left to me and to his college roommate, who had been his closest friend for 20 years. Not a dollar went to Claire. I don't know if Daniel had suspected something, or if he had simply made his estate plans thoughtfully. It doesn't matter now, but I will tell you that when the attorney read that to me, I had to step outside for a few minutes, because all I could think about was my son sitting at some desk, being careful, being precise, being the methodical man he had always been. And I was so proud of him and so heartbroken at the same time that I didn't know where to put it. I visit him every Sunday morning. I bring 2 cups of coffee from the diner on Route 9, and I put one on the grass near the headstone, and I drink mine, and I talk to him. I tell him about what's going on. I told him when the verdict came in. I told him I was sorry it took me so long to figure it out. I told him I wished I had been faster. I believe he knows. If you have a feeling that something is wrong, not a dramatic feeling, just a quiet, persistent, uncomfortable feeling that the math doesn't add up, please don't do what I did. Don't tell yourself you're being overprotective. Don't push it down because it's inconvenient or painful, or because saying it out loud might cost you something. Sometimes the people who love us most are the only ones paying close enough attention to catch what everyone else has decided to overlook. Pay attention. Say the hard thing. Don't wait for a toxicology report to tell you what your gut already knew. My son deserved better than my silence. I won't make that mistake for anyone else I love.